Okay, thank you, Michael, for making your time, making yourself available to speak with us. So I just wanted to ask you a few questions. The first thing is, what do you think evaluation can offer to the changing world today?
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to get to talk to you, and that's a great question, a very important question. And I think that what we offer is the idea that when people are trying out whatever they're trying out, that it's helpful to get feedback and data about how well things are happening. We know that the way that our brains work, actually, with recent brain research, is that we all, as human beings, regardless of culture and nationality, we have a tendency to distort information, to take in information and believe what we want to believe. We would like to believe that we're doing good things. We would like to feel good about things. And so we tend to get an unbalanced view and see the good things and not see the bad things, and to believe what we want to believe. These are natural tendencies. And so having somebody help us take a look at what's going on, in the case of programs, having somebody else help gather data about what's actually going on, what we call reality testing, what's really happening, provides a way for people to get better at what they're doing, to identify problems earlier, to find out what they're actually accomplishing, to learn to do more of the things that are working, and to change the things that aren't working, and to learn new things, to learn new possibilities and think about things in new ways. So we bring that kind of thinking to whatever people are trying to do, whether it's to meet the targets of the Sustainability Development Goals, or if it's innovation, or if it's developing new models. We help people do reality testing and find out what's actually happening so that they can make improvements and make better decisions.
Now I'd like to talk about evaluative thinking. I understand there's an increase of attention to evaluative thinking in the U.S. evaluation community. Why is this happening?
What we're finding is that a lot of education in both of younger children and in universities isn't so much teaching people critical thinking as they're learning facts, they're learning technology, they're learning engineering skills, they're learning business skills, but the arena of how to think about causality, how to think about generalizations, how to think about models, how to think about what works, and how to be ethical about these issues. Ethical thinking is a part of evaluative thinking.
Okay.
And so I do think in this context, that's become important as a way not just of doing evaluation, but increasingly we're building that capacity to help people run their programs in that way, to make evaluative thinking part of the program way of thinking, make it part of the culture of the organization to ask these kinds of questions.
So evaluative thinking is something that is needed not only for the evaluators, but also for people who run programs.
That's right. And that's where the match really comes, is that the people designing programs and implementing programs, as they begin to think evaluatively, then they're asking evaluation questions, and evaluators help them answer those questions. But the evaluators coming up with the questions on their own isn't as useful as the people who are going to take action and make decisions coming up with those questions.
Right.
When they have questions, if we go this way or that way, if we take a certain fork in the road, what will happen? We can help them look at that, but it's important that they're interested in that information, because as evaluators, we're not the users of the information. We need people who are going to use the information to care about the answers.
So you think there is a shortage of evaluative thinking among those who really plan, design, and run programs?
I do think that what we're finding is that there's a kind of what we call mechanistic thinking about putting things together in a kind of what seems to be a logical, mechanistic way based upon what's been done in the past, especially, or what people prefer or think about, but without bringing to bear issues of how you change human beings, of what we know about how to change attitudes and behavior and knowledge that gets more deeply into human change and organizational change and community change. The evaluators can help people design better programs by doing evaluative thinking and merging design thinking with evaluation thinking.
In Japan, I don't think there are people who realize or who look at evaluators that way. I think evaluation is something that happens outside the domain of program design and execution. How, in your experience, can those two be brought together more effectively?
It's a great question, and what we're finding is that evaluation did begin as what we call a back-end activity. That is, it happens at the end to find out whether or not you achieved goals, and you find out for accountability whether the money was appropriately spent and the things that were supposed to happen happened. But what we're increasingly finding when we talk about evaluative thinking is that at the beginning of a program, in the design of an intervention, if you ask questions like, well, what's it going to look like at the end? What can you expect to see? What's the variation that might occur? What are some early markers that tell you that you're online to do what you need to do? What's some early feedback that tells you whether or not things are going well? And so you ask these kinds of questions at the beginning and build in feedback along the way that helps make the design better, that helps be sure that the activities that are being planned will actually logically and empirically connect to and lead to those activities, will lead to the desired outcomes and impacts. So evaluative thinking at the front end, at the design stage, begins to imagine that what the results would look like at the end so that you can plan the intervention to better achieve those results and then monitor the unfolding of the intervention to see what adjustments to make.
I see. So as you know, we've been in Japan doing this course on developmental evaluation, and then we are very, very delighted to have you as the overall advisor for the program. What kind of advice do you have or what, for the new and young emerging evaluation professionals? What kind of training do you think they should go through to be effective, to be very responsive to the kind of the challenges and needs you just laid out?
Well, it's a great question, and it is the challenge of teaching people thinking skills. What I find is the most important thing for people to learn is what we call situation analysis, is to understand what the situation is on the programming side, on the intervention side, so that you can match the evaluation to that situation. So developmental evaluation is especially appropriate for innovation, where people are trying out new things, where the environment is changing, where people are learning as they go along, where there's a great deal of possibility and new ways of going about things. That's one kind of situation. A different situation is where you're trying to come up with a particular model or recipe for how to do things that you want to expand to other places, and you're testing that model. And a still different kind of evaluation is where you have created something and you're implementing it for the first time and you want to get feedback about how to improve it. So understanding the variations in situations helps us then match the evaluation to those situations. We don't begin with the evaluation and then apply it to the program, although unfortunately that does happen because evaluation and evaluators often only have one model that they know how to do, and so they then go and say, well, this is how you have to do evaluation. But there are many different ways of doing evaluation, just as there are many different ways of cooking. And so if you're going to cook a meal, you don't just say, well, I'm just going to cook the same meal for everybody. You want to know what the occasion is, who's coming, is it a fast food situation? Is it a gourmet dinner? Is it a family dinner? Are you trying out new recipes? Or are you wanting to replicate something that is a family tradition and make sure that it comes out exactly the same way it's come out before? Are there new ingredients on the marketplace? Are you trying out a new international dish? And so the cooking, being a chef, requires situation analysis to know who you're preparing the food for, and evaluation requires situation analysis. Who are we doing the evaluation for, and how are they going to use it? So learning to ask those questions, learning to analyze the situation, and then match the evaluation to that. Don't begin with the evaluation and force it on the situation, but begin with the situation and then figure out what kind of evaluation is appropriate for this situation.
So the challenge I think we all face. I think you are a very, very seasoned professional, and there are many in your country maybe, but I think the challenges that we face in Japan is that we don't really know what to do. Kind of situation arises all the time. How, like you said, situational analysis is very important. How to really analyze the situation in a proper way. People tend to look for tools.
Yeah.
These are the tools that can be used for to analyze this situation, that situation. But it may not be that simple. Maybe we cannot really jump onto concrete tools. What would you say to that?
I think that's a very important point. In fact, when I begin evaluations by bringing together the key stakeholders, the people who are going to be using the evaluation. That may include program staff, funders, some people who would actually be going through a program or who have gone through a program, perhaps people in the community who are affected by the program, administrators, a board member if there's a board, but to bring together a small group of the people who care about the evaluation or are going to be using the evaluation, and at that first meeting, which is often about 2 hours, I have to tell them we're not going to discuss methods. We're not going to discuss tools. They think they're coming in right away to design a survey.
Right.
They think, oh, we're getting together and we're going to start doing the tools.
Right.
But I want to spend that time. Tell me about who's going through the program. Tell me about what the intervention is. Where's this coming from? What difference are you trying to make for people? Is it a short-term program or a long-term program? Are these people with severe difficulties, or is it people are going to be able to get the change fairly quickly? What's the situation we're in? Are you trying out new things? Are you borrowing a model from someplace else that you're doing here? Is it a situation with some new staff who need to learn how to do this? Let's get into the situation and generate together the questions that need to be answered in order for you to do a better job and make better decisions. Once we have those questions and have really spent some time, what are the questions? Then we can identify tools and samples and methods, but we don't begin with that. We really
Right,
begin with learning to take the time to savor the important questions.
Okay, so the, how to really tease out those important questions, I think is the key you're saying. So are those the evaluation questions then?
Yeah, often when people get into it, there are more questions than a particular evaluation can answer. So you have
Right.
to set priorities and see what's going to be the most useful. But I like to frame it somewhat like this. What is it you don't know that if you did know would make a difference to what you do? So some things are known, and some things are not known, and some things you can't find out, and some things you can find out. So the thinking about, for example, let's say that I'm just working now with a program to help teach parents, first-time parents, how to be good parents with their young children, with their newborn children.
Okay.
And we're designing that, and there's new research on how infants develop in their brains and about emotional attachments. And this program wants to introduce parents to do this new work. And so the typical kind of evaluation people have in mind, well, let's give them a test at the beginning about how much they know, and then a test at the end and show what they've learned. So as we're talking about that, I said, so you're going to be introducing them some new things. It's a 15-week program, 2 hours once a week for 15 weeks. And you could give them a beginning test, and you could give them an end test. Is there anything early on that you think you ought to get some feedback? Do you want to just wait till the very end and figure out whether or not they learned what you wanted them to learn? And so we thought about it and said, yeah, we probably should find out after about 3 weeks whether or not they're getting it. Are they starting to feel they're learning? Is it important? And are people continuing to come? Are there dropouts?
Right.
Are people finding it valuable? Are they starting to apply it? Are they understanding it? We probably ought to find that out pretty soon and not wait to the end and find out they didn't learn anything. Let's do it along the way and get some feedback from the parents. So, as that question comes up, then one of the methodological questions becomes, well, what would be the difference of doing that with a survey, with a group discussion, with the focus group? And the question there is, as a part of the program, are you wanting these parents going through the program to network with each other? Are you wanting them to get to know each other? Because if we do it as a focus group, then that will help them learn from each other. They'll get a chance to talk to each other even as we're gathering data. Or if that's not important, then you could do the survey. And they said, oh yes, we very much want people to interact. We want them to get to know each other. So if you have an evaluation method that helps people learn from each other and help us learn from them, then let's do that. So it's matching the evaluation to the nature of the situation and having options for doing that. So we ended up doing a focus group that the parents really loved because they not only were talking to me and getting information for the program staff, but they were hearing from each other what they liked about the program and getting to know each other better.
So those are the timing when methodological questions come into play. But you were also talking about the importance of grasping early signs so that intervention might shift depending on what the early sign tells you. So
if you wait till the end of the program and find out that half the people dropped out, you can't do anything about it then. But if they're starting to drop out, then you can go find out right away, why are people dropping out? What do we need to change?
So the emerging evaluators, they may have some skills. They may be trained to be able to kind of detect some of the early signs and signals. What are the things that you think you would tell them if you're going to this initial 2-hour meeting when they have to kind of facilitate the situation analysis? What are the things they have to have in order to be effective in doing that exercise?
It's a great question, and I think that part of the nervousness, understandable nervousness of new and young evaluators is they're not sure, as you said, what they're going to do, and so they too quickly try to sell people on what they know how to do. If they know how to do surveys, then they're going to be thinking, how do I get these people to do a survey? If they know how to do focus groups, they're going to say, how do I get people to do a survey? If they're an economist, they may want to do some kind of cost-benefit analysis or econometric piece. And so the real challenge, I think, is to have the confidence to ask questions, to not jump into solving the problem of what methods to use, but to get to know the kind of decisions that are going to be coming up, to try to understand what the world looks like from the point of view of the staff or the funder. What decisions are they facing? What are they trying to figure out? What are what we call the stakes for them? What's their interest in this? What are they worried about? I mean, the young evaluator is worried about the evaluation, and that's understandable. But what we want to do is, what are they worried about? So that we're worried about what they're worried about. And that then helps us figure out, all right, how can I help them with what they're worried about? They're then going to pay more attention to what we have because I'm offering them something useful. They're not worried about the evaluation. They're worried about the program and what they're going to do. So I have to enter into their world. I have to be able to understand the situations they face. Let me give you a practical example from utilization-focused evaluation. Let's say that I'm a funder and a program staff, and the question is whether we're going to continue funding a program. Is it good enough to continue funding? And so typically what we think that means is at the end of the program, you get results. Say this parent education program, at the end of 15 weeks, we have a post-test, we see what knowledge people have gained and decide if they're learning enough. All right, that sounds reasonable. But then you ask the funder, when do you have to decide whether to continue funding this program? And you ask the program staff, when do you need to know if the program's going to continue? Well, it turns out those decisions are almost never made at the end of the program. Because you have staff hired, the funders have to know what their future budgets are, and so if you ask the practical question, they say, well, we probably are going to have to make that decision about halfway through the program, so that we know if it's going to continue. That you can't make this decision the last day of the program. Okay, now, so what kind of data can we get halfway through to decide if the program seems to be making progress enough to continue funding it? And if we don't ask that practical question, then the evaluator's typical mindset is simply end of program data. The logical data, getting the most data, the best data possible, is at the very end. But the decision is going to get made before then. And so if we wait till the end and write a report, but they've already made the funding decision, our report is useless. It's those kind of practical things of moving into the world of the people who are taking action and helping them think, when do you have to make decisions? What kind of decisions? What are you going to be making those decisions based on? And time the evaluation to provide useful information for what's really going on.
I think it's very, very useful to have that kind of concrete example, but it's easier said than done, no? In actuality, But thank you very much, Michael. As always, your insight is going to be very, very useful for us. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.